A grocery store encounter that changed everything. It was an ordinary afternoon in Los Angeles. The sun cast warm golden hues over the city as people went about their day. In a small neighborhood grocery store, shoppers weaved through aisles, grabbing essentials for their evening meals. The hum of casual conversations, the beeping of checkout scanners, and the distant sound of a baby giggling filled the air. Among them was legendary rapper and cultural icon, Snoop Dogg. Dressed in his signature laid-back style, he blended effortlessly into the crowd. For him, this was just another quick stop for some snacks and drinks before heading home. But what was supposed to be an uneventful errand turned into an unforgettable lesson in dignity, history, and human decency. Near the fruit section, an elderly woman named Mrs. Thompson stood, squinting as she adjusted her glasses. She was in her 70s, with carefully pinned silver hair and an air of impatience. As she reached for a bag of apples, her eyes caught sight of Snoop Dogg standing a few feet away, casually scrolling through his phone while balancing a basket of groceries. Her lips pursed. Her gaze hardened. Without hesitation, she muttered loudly enough for those around her to hear, "You people don't belong here." For a moment, time seemed to freeze. A few nearby shoppers glanced over, some exchanging uneasy looks. Others pretended not to hear. The store, once filled with the everyday hustle and bustle, grew quieter, as if holding its breath. Snoop Dogg lifted his gaze slowly. His expression remained unreadable, but those who knew him could tell, he was thinking carefully. Instead of reacting immediately, he let the silence stretch, making sure her words settled into the minds of everyone within earshot. Mrs. Thompson didn't back down. "Why don't you go back to Africa where you came from?" she said, her voice sharper now, cutting through the air like a blade. The weight of her words hung heavily in the space between them. Every eye in the store was now on Snoop Dogg. He could have yelled, walked away, or escalated the situation, but he chose another path. Taking a deep breath, he set his basket down gently. Then, with the calm authority of someone who had seen and lived through more than most, he spoke. "Ma'am, do you realize what you just said?" His voice wasn't angry, it was steady, reflective, as though he were giving her a chance to rethink her words. She folded her arms. "I said what I said. This is my country. People like you don't belong here." A hush fell over the store. A young mother near the bread aisle clutched her child's hand tighter. An employee stocking bananas stood frozen in place. Even the cashiers had stopped scanning items, their attention locked on the exchange. Snoop Dogg nodded slowly. "Let's talk about that since you brought it up." He adjusted his posture, standing taller, commanding the room, not through intimidation, but through sheer presence. "You tell me I don't belong here. But let me tell you something about where I come from." The store was silent. Even the hum of the refrigerators seemed distant now. Snoop's voice was strong but calm as he continued. "My great-great-grandfather was born right here, in California. Before that, my ancestors were brought here against their will, forced to build this country without being given a piece of it. They worked from sunrise to sunset, treated like property instead of people. But they survived. They endured." Mrs. Thompson's expression faltered slightly, but she remained silent. "My grandfather fought in a war for this country. Risked his life. But when he came back, he couldn't even sit in the same restaurant as the man he fought beside. My parents? They fought too. Not with guns, but by raising me to believe in respect, in community, in something bigger than hate." A man near the dairy section put his phone down. An older couple whispered to each other but didn't look away. The weight of his words was undeniable. "So you tell me I don't belong?" Snoop's voice softened, tinged with sadness. "I've given back to this city. I've helped kids who had no one. I've built schools. I've created opportunities for people of all backgrounds. So tell me, ma'am, what exactly makes me less American than you? The elderly woman's fingers trembled slightly as she clutched her bag of apples. The fire in her eyes dimmed, replaced by something else, something almost like regret. Snoop Dogg took a step back. I could have walked away, he said, this time addressing the crowd as much as he was speaking to her. But ignorance doesn't get better in silence. If we don't confront it, it grows. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then, from near the frozen foods aisle, a voice broke the silence. He's right, said a middle-aged man in a baseball cap. We have to be better than this. A woman near the bakery section nodded. My father fought in that same war, she said softly. He always told me the only color that mattered was the red on the flag. Slowly, the atmosphere in the store shifted. People weren't just watching anymore, they were thinking. Reflecting. Mrs. Thompson opened her mouth as if to speak but hesitated. For the first time, she seemed uncertain. Her voice, when it finally came, was quieter. I didn't mean, but she trailed off, as if realizing that her intent didn't matter as much as the impact of her words. Snoop Dogg gave her a small nod, his expression neither triumphant nor bitter. It's not about what you meant, he said gently. It's about what you said. And words matter. A slow, hesitant clap echoed through the store. Then another. And another. Soon, the applause swelled, not just for Snoop Dogg's response, but for the courage it took to meet hate with dignity. Mrs. Thompson didn't apologize. But as she pushed her cart toward the exit, her expression was different. Thoughtful. Changed. As Snoop Dogg walked toward the checkout, the young cashier smiled at him. That was incredible, she said. You really made people think today. Snoop smiled back. Sometimes, that's all it takes. Outside, the sun was beginning to set, casting long shadows over the city he called home. Some lessons take time to settle. But today, he knew he had planted a seed. And sometimes, that's where change begins.